Okay, guys, so thank you for coming along. My name's Damon. I'm just going to show you some of my methodologies for ship creation. So this is the ship that we're going to be modeling today. Um, I did a poll on Facebook a few weeks ago. Well, I started it a week or so ago, just to see what kind of era people wanted to see. The overwhelming winner was TNG Voyager DS9. So as you can see from the ship, there's a lot of influences from things like Voyager with the secondary hull shape. Also, you could say the saucer shape, Sovereign, which is, you can clearly see the nacelles and the pylons are very Sovereign-esque. It's got a little bit of Defiant in there with the little stubby nacelles coming off the saucer. Obviously, Prometheus with the MVAM. And just some of my own design methodologies. So that's what we're going to be trying to model today. So I'll show you how I do that. I'll also be covering some texturing, so how to create the Aztec textures and how to apply them. You will also find all of the software that I'm using is completely free. So obviously I am using at the moment Blender 4.5.0, which is the newest version out. Texturing wise, we're also going to be using GNU Image Manipulation Programme, or GIMP. So that's a completely free open source software. So we'll go through how to create the Aztec textures, the noise maps, and how I go about creating the texture in Blender, applying it to the model and unwrapping. We'll go through some of the things with the MVAM, so how to kind of split it so that you've got form fitting. The way that I do things is not the be all and end all. If you find a better way to do it, then feel free to use that. Feel free to let me know how you do that, because I'm always learning. I'm always interested in learning new things. But yeah, so this name of the ship at the moment, it doesn't have a name, and like its creator, it doesn't have class. So if you think you find a name that works for it, if you think you've got a good name for it, then let me know. And one of the things that we are going to also be doing is showing you how to texture, put the registry numbers and things on. But obviously I can't do that until I've got a registry number and a name. But anyway, so we'll get started. So we've got a brand new document in Blender. So first thing that we have to do, you have to do with every single thing, is sacrifice the cube, the default cube, to the gods of Blender for a good model. So there we go. So that's that gone. So I am using, as I said, Blender 4.5.0. There are a few add-ons that I've got. They're all free, but you can usually find them. So get extensions and just install them from there. So there's not really a huge amount that's different. I've got, yeah, so mesh repair tools. I don't really use most of these, to be honest. So you can just do it with a standard one. The only one that I would definitely recommend is the glare node controller. That's purely because with later versions of Blender, you used to be able to set ambient occlusion and bloom, so that if you had a glowing surface, like the nacelles, for example, um, it would look a little bit more realistic with a bit of a fog glow around it. They took that out in later versions. It's something you can do with compositing, but yeah, with this node, it handles that for you, so it makes it a little bit easier. So anyway, on to the actual ship creation. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to shift A. Oh, before I do anything else, sorry, let me just turn on screencast keys so you can see what I'm doing. So there we go. So down in the left hand corner here, you'll see left click, right click, scroll up, scroll down, mouse button, and any keyboard presses that I make, just so that you can follow along. Feel free, if you're following along at home, to you know, miss out certain parts that I do that you're not too keen on. Some people don't like four nacelle ships, for example. That's fine. You can just skip that entire bit. But anyway, so here we go. So first of all, we're going to add a mesh cylinder. Now I tend to keep everything in scale. So radius of this ship, for example, say it's 225. That's just, yeah, ooh, I'm going to need to zoom out in a second. So we'll up this to 124, and the depth I'm going to keep at 3.5. Reason for 3.5 is because the deck height, including kind of space for the Jeffries tubes and things like that, is around 3.5 meters. That's something I was told when I was first getting into this, and I kind of stick to it because it makes sense. So Alt Z to go into X-ray mode, and we are going to make sure we've got vertices selected. And we can select a group of these, move them forward a little bit, and there we go. So that gives us a nice Odyssey-esque, almost Voyager-esque shape. One of the things you're also going to want to do if you're working on models of this size is, as you can see, it clips out there. So we'll just go into the View option and change that to 2500. That gives us plenty of space. So come out of X-ray mode with Alt Z and go into the Edge Select. These three at the top here you can select by 1, 2 or 3. I don't tend to use that because I keep forgetting, but there we go. So we'll select the top one, the top face. We can press N to get rid of this stuff on the side. And we'll start with the actual shape of the saucer itself. So some people, you can, if you want, just, oh, going the wrong way, do that and then add other edge loops. I prefer to just extrude by 3.5 and then start creating the shape from there. There's no right or wrong way to do that. You can, yeah, do it to your heart's desire. So we'll just keep doing this until we get the actual shape that we want for the saucer. So one of the hallmarks of the TNG era, or TNG Voyager era, is the saucers tend to be a lot more rounded compared to the TOS and the TMP era. TOS and TMP era tend to go in and then sweep up, whereas TNG tends to be a little bit more of a saucer shape. So as I said, these are 3.5, so 1 deck. So we're going to make the rim of the saucer 2 decks high, and then we can do another 3.5, extrude it down, move it in. So one of the things again that especially the Enterprise D has is there's usually a flat edge and then it comes out. Voyager has the same kind of thing. Just a quick aside, with insetting, you can just press I for inset and move it, but you'll find that when you get down to a certain size, let me show you here. Oh, come on. Alright, we'll just do it this way. No, that's not going to do it. But anyway, when you get to a certain size, you tend to get crossovers. So I tend to just press I to inset and then use the scale tool to scale the size of that inset. Just so you don't get, let's see if it does it, yeah. So you don't get that kind of thing, whichever side that you're, or whichever size you're insetting. So that's a personal preference. You don't have to do that. It's just something that I do. So we'll 3.5 meters again, 3.5 meters again, 3.5 meters again, 3.5 meters, 3.5, and there we go. So as you'll see there, we've got quite a nice looking just basic saucer shape really at the moment. So to get the engineering section hull, or the secondary hull, whichever way you'd like to call it, there are various different ways to do it. I mean, I tend to usually Boolean all of my parts together because for certain animation aspects it needs to be a unified mesh. No right or wrong way to do it. You can just select the edge of the faces here, move them out, and so on and so forth. What we're going to do though is we're just going to go back into edit mode using the tab button, and we'll add a cube. If I can find the cube, there we go. Let's move it back a little bit, scale it up, so that's going to be about the width of the bottom. Scale it forward now. So we're going to want the front edge to be about level with that, the top of the saucer, just so that it gives us a nice neck area. We can up it a little bit there, so we're going to want some overhang at the bottom. So now that we've got that about right, we can play around with everything else as we want. So go back into object mode, select the X-ray, select these top vertices, and up here you've got various different tools. So this one is where the transform origin is from, so median, individual. We'll be playing around with that a little bit later. This is snapping, so increment, grid, vertex. So what we're going to want to use on this one is vertex. So make sure we've got that selected with the 4 dots. select the vertex snap, and then using the blue z-axis we can move that up and we move that in line with the top of the saucer. So now we can turn that off, we can move this one down, so that's going to be about the length that we want. So just bear with me 2 seconds, because I'm trying to follow along with something I've already made. I'm going to have some references, so if you see me clicking off the screen, I do apologise. There we go. Right, so that's about that. So it doesn't look very saucer-like at the moment, or very engineering section-like at the moment, but that's fine. That's what your loop cuts and things are for. First things first, we shall change the shape of this a little bit. Actually, we'll do that in a minute. So we're going to want a center line, and then we're going to use the scale tool to get that to about a width that we want. That looks about, yeah, it looks about right to me. So now what we can do is take this front edge and there, so that's where the deflector dish is going to go. It still looks very blocky, so we've got here loop tool, loop cut, so we'll add one about there. You can move this up, go into X-ray mode, we'll go back. So if you go into X-ray mode first, with the loop cut you can place it wherever you want without it affecting the mesh at first. Once you've actually changed, put it in though, if you change the shape it can cause some issues. But that's probably about where we're going to want it. So we're going to want it to belly out a little bit in these bits, and then it's going to kind of taper back in for the end where the shuttle bay and everything's going to go. So we'll go back into the scale tool, press Shift and Alt to select that one as well. And we're going to make sure here that we've got individual origins, and then we can belly this out however much we want. So that's starting to look a little bit more like it. I think what we're going to do is select the whole thing, skinny it down a bit. Actually, we'll do this a slightly different way, so I do apologise about that. What we're going to do is we're going to add the loop cuts before we move that front section. So that's about there, and that's about there. So I go back into this. So rather than scaling all, which is going to make it belly out like that, we're just going to scale it from the x-axis first. So that looks a little bit more like it. And then we can select these, belly it in. And it's starting to look a little bit more like what we want. So we can move these forward a little bit. Go to medium point, so it's going to scale to the medium point within. There we go. So we'll move that one out again, as we did before, just to give it that Voyager-esque shape. So that's looking a little bit more like it, but it's very, very flat. So again, with the edge cut tools, we'll go along there. We'll have 5 cuts. And then making sure we've got individual origin selected again. We can scale it out by the x-axis, and then you press Shift and Alt to deselect that, and just keep doing that until you've got a nice kind of bit more of a curved shape. There's not a huge amount that needs to be done with some of these last ones, and we'll do the same on the bottom. So again, 5 cuts. We're going to do the bottom, will look slightly different. We're going to do a couple of slightly different things. So again, we're going to go into X-ray mode, and we're going to make sure we've got the entirety of the bottom selected. And then again with the x-axis, going to scroll that in, and scroll that out, so it's got a bit more of a curve, similar to the Enterprise D hull. I think Voyager's hull does a similar kind of in and out. So don't worry too much about them being a little bit blocky at the moment. So if we go into object mode, you can see there's quite a few lines. It doesn't really matter a huge amount because we're going to add some bevels and things like that later. So we've got a fairly basic looking star drive section, secondary hull, engineering section, and source are there. So we're going to be playing around with this a little bit later. I do apologise if sometimes I do jump back and forth between doing things. It's just the way that my brain works. It's a little bit weird, but there we go. So that's a bit more of the size, so that's where the shuttle bay is going to go. If we select these two, so again, Alt, Shift, and S. We'll do each one at a time actually, because it's a bit easier. So Alt, Shift, and S, and then we Control B, and we can add a bevel in, just so that it makes it a bit more curved. So we add 4, 5. So you can see 5. We'll do the same with this one. And about the same. You'll see if we look at that from the bottom now, rather than being angular, it curves nicely. Let's have a little bit more play with this if we want. So we'll add another one there. And we can scale that in. Add another bevel to it. So that's quite a nice looking shape. Yep, I think that will do. Right, so if we now move on to the pylons. So we add a plane, so mesh plane. I'll move that down. Scale it up. Scale it up. Make sure it's on the right kind of level. It's difficult to see from this angle, but if we move it into about there, then that should do it. So that's about the width of them that we're going to want, and then we're also going to want to go back into edit mode, select the front vertices, and move that forward. So it's going to start about here and swoop down, and it's going to swoop in the back. So if we add a loop cut in the center, and then we can just delete, get rid of this half completely. So we'll go into the modifiers on the side here. You've got the various different modifiers. I tend to use mirror quite a lot, and you'll see me at various points throughout the build applying the mirror, deleting, applying the mirror, deleting, adding, so on and so forth. Just because it's easy to do. It's difficult if you're editing a section here, for example, for the impulse engines, and then you've got to do the same over the side here. It's a lot easier if you just snip it in half and do one side. Same with the phaser arrays and escape pods and all that kind of stuff. So we'll add another loop cut here. So if we do, let's say 5, that should do it. And then we can start making the shape. So up here you've got another option, so as well as the snapping and the origins, proportional editing. So by turning that on, when you move this, depending on the size of the proportional editing, it will move this one in sync with it so that it looks smooth, which will also then chain onto this one depending on the size. So there are different ways to do it, smooth, sphere. I don't tend to change any of these options. The only one that I do is proportional size, mainly because of the fact that we're working on a scale that's a lot bigger than just a meter. So we put that up for the moment. Doesn't matter too much what you put that at. Because we can change that as we're doing things. So once you grab and start to move, you'll see that this grey circle around the outside, that's the sphere of it, or sphere of influence. So we're going to want it to be a bit more than that. So we're going to use the mouse scroll button to scroll down. So that's looking, yeah, that's a bit more like it. We can then also grab this and, ooh, stupid. So we can grab this and start to move it again and put that all the way down just to give it a bit more of a curve, or we could just not do that at all because that didn't look great. So no, we'll leave that as it is there. And we'll do the same with these two and move them up. Yep, so that's quite a nice shape. The only thing that we want to do now is maybe move that further back. So it's looking a bit more like it, and then we can move them, sweep them further back like the Sovereign is. So that looks about right. So there are a few things that I am going to change about that. So we'll take the proportional editing off. And if we use the scale tools, we can scale that way and just move it down until we're a little bit happy with the shape. That one, for example, I'm not too keen on where that's set. That looks a little bit better. So that's how you make the basic face of it. So now we can add proportional editing again, move those up. So we'll move that proportional editing. Don't worry too much about these here. We're going to sort that out so that it's nice and flat in a minute. Because after we finish with the shape, we're going to add a solidify modifier, and that'll get everything sorted. So if we take the proportional editing off, put the vertex snap back on, then we can grab the blue Z axis and move everything so that it's back in line. So that is looking much nicer, and you can actually see it from the side now, so it's a little bit better. Again, once we've actually got the nacelles built, we're going to play around with the shape of this a little bit, just so that it doesn't look too long on this way, and it doesn't leave too much negative space here, because that can sometimes be a little bit difficult when it comes to the actual ship design. So we've done that, and now what we're going to need to do is go back into object mode. Now if we just add generate solidify, it doesn't tend to realize that it's been changed in shape and size so much. So if you start adding thickness to it, so for example if you wanted about 3.5, well, that's not going to look right. You can manually have a look at it and just change the thickness that way, but it's a lot easier and it's a lot better to get into the habit once you've edited the shape. If you're going to be putting any modifiers on it, like solidify or subdivide or anything like that, beveling the edges sometimes as well, you're going to need to, but object, apply, all transforms. And now you'll see when we have the generate solidify modifier, put that to 3.5, then it actually is 3.5. So that's that done. So we can apply the mirror and apply the solidify. We're then going to also change, so we're going to need to move these up because we want this this section that's kind of hidden to be flat, so that when we do Alt S and we're going to select cursor to selected, go back into edit mode, this one we're going to set the origin to the 3D cursor, and then we can generate another mirror, but we're going to change it so it's on the Z axis. There we go. So you can also, if you really wanted, and this is something that I do quite a lot, if we go back into this, delete that. So delete the vertices whenever you're doing a mirror modifier. If you dissolve, then it's going to leave an edge in the center here, and that means you have to go in and clear it up later. But if we delete that, then we can put the X back in, and it still brings us the same result. It just means that when we're changing anything, we only need to change this bit here. So there we go. So we've got a basic ship shape, which isn't too bad. I think there are still some things that I want to do with it. In fact, let's have a look at this now. So put proportional editing back on. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad. We can move this edge a little bit just to give it a bit more of a move this front one by quite a bit just to stretch it out. That's looking a bit more like it. So yeah, fairly happy with that at the moment. Now we're going to go and add the nacelles. So again, we're going to go with the cube. We just move that out here so it's out of the way. That's about the size and length that we want it. So let's have a look if we put it on there. So maybe about there. Could do with being a tad longer. just purely because when we look at the side here, where's that gone? No. Right, I do apologise, I added a plane instead of a cube because I am stupid. There we go, so that's the cube. So you could do this with a plane. It's completely up to you. There's no right or wrong way. You could add a cylinder. You could add a sphere and just play around with the size of that. It's just for these ones in particular, I'm going to be using a cube. So we've got that about. It wants to be a little bit thinner there because we're going to build this up later. So again, if we add the modifier generate mirror, so we're going to mirror the X and the Z, but we're going to set the mirror object to be the pylons. And there you go. So that allows you to give it a bit more of a look from the side, just to see. I think they possibly need to come forward a bit, maybe stretch them out a little bit more. Yeah, that's looking a bit more like it from the front. I mean, one of the things that I tend to go by when I'm designing ships is not everybody does, and you don't have to, but the original Rod and Breed design rules. So we'll just kind of get those up here quickly. And you'll see there's if we can find it, images. So yeah, so these are some of the design rules. So the nacelles should be in pairs. I always try to do them in pairs, so 2, 4, never really use 6. They should always be line of sight, so that's why I usually have them up or down, and you should always be able to see the bus side collectors from the front. That's just some of them. You don't have to follow those if you don't want. There are a lot of ships out there that have 3 nacelles or 2 nacelle or 1 nacelle. Sorry, it's completely up to you. I tend to go by them just because it gives it a bit more of a, what's the word I'm looking for? A bit more of a unified design methodology, if you know what I mean. So anyway, enough of that. So now we're going to go into the nacelles. We'll go into the edit mode, and we're going to start creating the shape that we've got for the nacelles. So again, it's going to start off looking a little bit on the blocky side, but that's okay because we can change that. So with the loop cut tool, we're going to add one, let's say around there. We can add another one about there. And then we can go back into X-ray mode, scale on the X-axis, and create the little point at the front, and create the point at the back. We can belly that out a little bit if we want. So that's looking a bit more like the shape that we want. So now come out of X-ray mode. With the nacelles, it doesn't really matter too much about going by the 3.5. In fact, in some ways for the nacelles, it's a lot better to set the height that you want. It would help to proportion everything off. Set the height that you want, and then belly the boom. We can move that down a little bit, and you'll see it gives us ample space there. So we'll do the same with the bottom. So these are very, very sovereign-esque looking nacelles with the shape of them and things. You can play around with where you want that bottom to be, just so that it gives it a bit more of a dynamic shape. So that's that. So we're also going to add, let's put another loop cut there. We can loop cut across the top, so that if we really wanted, and we will, we can give it a bit more of a shape. So it's a bit more of a rounder shape. That also gives us something to work with here when it comes to actually creating the bus side collectors and things. Right. So bus side collectors. So yeah, Sovereign tends to have the big ones at the front. So before we do the inset, and I'll show you what happens if you don't. If we inset that, you can see it seems to only be inset in the sides, not very much at the bottom, which obviously isn't what we want. And the reason for that, as I was saying earlier, is we need to apply all transforms. And now when we inset, it insets nice and evenly. So we're going to inset by 1.5. We don't have to do it by a uniform size, but because we're going to be doing the same on these, if we make a note of the size that we've done it, it just gives it a little bit more of a uniformity. So inset by 1.5 again, and there we go. So if we select all of these, and we can make sure we've got individual origins. So that's going to take the origin of each of the faces, and it's going to inset that amount. So as you can see from the blue lines, so we'll inset by -1, sorry. And there we go. So as you can see, we've got the bossar collectors in there. We're also going to add a couple more loop cuts, just to give us a bit more shape. We're obviously going to need a couple on here. So there we go. So as I said before, you don't have to follow this design completely. It's just showing you how I do certain things and why I do certain things, really. Because there is usually a method to the madness. It's very, very rare that I actually say that, but there we go. So this is all. So if we select all of those, we can insert that in again, and then extrude. This time we're just going to move it down. And we could move it in. Ooh, wrong one. Scale there. So that's going to be part of the nacelle grills. Don't worry too much about some of these hard edges, because again, we're going to clean that up a little bit later. And because we're having some influences from the Enterprise D and things, well, from that kind of era, we are going to add. In fact, it's going to be a lot easier. So if we go into X-ray mode and select the faces that we want, so that's going to select the faces all sides. See, these little dots are going to say which face it's actually going to select. So it just makes it a lot easier when you select multiple faces on both sides. So there we go back into edit mode, inset that a little bit again. Why is that not insetted? Inset, there we go, change that up a little bit. So yeah, that's looking good. So extrude, and I just press enter, or you can press escape, and then we can set that to about there. So there we go, we have most of the things here sorted. So if we go back to we'll do the nacelle, the pylons first of all. Still not overly happy with the shape of those. So we are just going to manually do some things just to try and yeah, it's looking a little bit better, but yeah, again, we can come back to that. So if we go back to the main engineering section, this is very flat, and sometimes you don't want it to be. You want to have a nice bit of a curve. So various different ways to do that. What I'm going to do is add a loop cut down the center. And we can get rid of half of that. So X, delete vertices. delete vertices, add modify, generate mirror, and then we can go back into normal mode, join those, ooh, yeah. Actually, we don't really need to go that far, so hopefully we can just do it with these. We'll go back into proportional editing, move that way down, and that gives us a little bit more of a shape, and it gives us something more to play with when it comes to the shuttle bay and things. So speaking of the shuttle bay, we'll start doing that now. So we want to apply this mirror modifier, and then we can select, say, these faces here. So if you press Control, it will select from where you last selected to where you're selecting now. And then we want to extrude that. Ooh. Keep forgetting to turn off proportional editing. There we go, so that's a little bit more of a shape. Again, that gives us quite a nice looking shuttle bay. We'll select these faces again. Just make it a little bit thinner so it's a bit taller. And if we want, we can use the scale tool on the y-axis to make it stand up a little bit more. Yeah, I think that's looking okay. So now we're going to want to start adding other details to it, like the bridge modules and things like that. I'm still looking at this, actually thinking, is that going to be too wide? No, I think that looks okay. And don't worry about these artifacts at the side here. These are all going to disappear once you actually set the boolean and put that in there. But it's been nearly 40 minutes so far. We've got the basic design of the ship. The next tutorial we are going to cover adding the texturing, adding more of the detailing, how to create the actual textures themselves. So the textures themselves we're going to do the Aztecing. We're going to have an impulse engine, so obviously we're going to need an impulse engine texture. We're going to have a deflector dish, so we're going to need a deflector dish texture. Warp grills, bussards, all of that kind of thing. So it's a lot of fun to play with. It is fairly simple to do in GIMP. It's mainly using filters, so usually the mosaic, polar coordinates, and things like that. Yeah, so we'll go through that. I'll start recording that, and hopefully that'll be up within the next day or so. But I hope you've enjoyed it so far. If you've got any comments on it, like ship names or how it would be easier to do something, or anything that you'd like to mention, please do. Please like and subscribe, and see my page on Facebook, which is Mephisticles Studios. So please feel free to like and follow it, and it'd be nice to see you again in the future. I hope you've enjoyed it, everybody, and speak to you again soon.